All right, now to our first conversation. Nigeria's business environment is still growing, but momentum is clearly slowing. Latest report from the Nigerian Economic Summit Group shows the Business Confidence Index dropped sharply to 101.2 points in March from 117.2 points in February 2026, signaling weaker expansion, even though we're still above, the expansion level. Also hot today, President Bola Tinubu has approved the implementation of Nigeria's 2026 fiscal policy measures, introducing new tariff adjustments and excise duties. The policy, supposed to take effect April 1st, includes levies on beverages, tobacco products, and a new green tax surcharge as part of efforts to align with regional trade frameworks and boost government revenue. We're going to unpack all of this now. And the best brain to help us with that right here, we have Mr. George Onafowokan, is the MD CEO, Coleman Wires and Cables. He's joining me right here in the studio. It's great to have you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning, Ladi.
Always expecting your comments on these matters. And we're going to analyze the first quarter of 2026. It started off quite rosy.
Yes,
kind of. January to February, we all had our projections, for the global economy, for the Nigerian economy, and for major commodities. But that flipped towards the end of February, coming into March. And now we're seeing the data from the NESG showing slower pace of growth. Definitely, it's because of what played out towards the tail end of February into March. So it was expected. It was a no-brainer. March would be tough. And there's a saying there, beware the Ides of March. Finally played out, in this quarter. Talk to me about this new data and how it really felt, for you.
In every circumstance, when you look at it from the perspective of manufacturers, business and life is dynamic. Now, when something is dynamic, you also have to expect the unexpected. The unexpected is the impact of the Israel-US-Iran war. That changed every dynamics changed the sense of direction of where everybody in the world believed 2026 direction was going. From a business perspective, it was a shock the system literally did not expect. We were not planned for, but the impact was greater within the last 6 weeks than everybody could ever think for. Oil prices went skyrocket. The Strait of Hormuz became a toll gate. Highest bidder who crosses, who doesn't cross, who's your friend, who's not. And I think the dynamics of what has happened really now is we're all readjusting to the unexpected. So, of course, the figures that we see, literally purchasing index going down, was meant to happen, really, when you look at it. Look at today, the price of petrol, diesel, the price of gas in the world, the price of importation cost went up. Some of our goods literally went up 40-50% overnight in terms of raw material cost. And some of it was due to Iran supplying some Chinese firms that literally lost petrochemical availability immediately. That happened. So they needed local sourcing prices went up. Indexes changed. Inflation changed. If you look at it, by January, the whole world saw an easing. Every central bank in the world was easing interest rate. All of a sudden, everybody's stalling on interest rate. Now they're thinking of raising interest rate. So, invariably, the businesses are taking a shock. They're taking a hit from external factors. The Nigerian factor today, the Nigerian scenario, literally we're taking a hit from what we didn't plan for. And so sometimes it's easy for us to point easy positions on people or certain situations, but really it was inevitable, and it has happened. But I think Nigeria has been better placed to handle such a shock than we have ever been. We have the Dangote refinery and other refineries, modulars. Major advantage of that is that some government policy, fiscal policy went right 2 years ago naira for crude. That was a game changer for us, really. So the impact of naira for crude with those petrochemical companies in Nigeria are seen as having an impact, but not the same type of impact. If you look at the rest of the world, there are queues everywhere. They're rationing everywhere. We're all driving in Nigeria and literally be able to drive in and drive out of petrol stations because we changed the dynamics.
Even though we're driving and drive out, some of us drive out sad because our disposable income has been hammered because of the price increase.
But the good thing is it's all temporary. It's not long term. The shocks are not shocks that we all don't see reversal. Just look, simple announcement of a ceasefire tailed crude oil prices below $100 for the first time. And that just shows you that, look, whatever glitch we're seeing, yes, though we see long-term impact, but there will be also immediate reliefs that would happen. And that would change the quarter that we're seeing, and future quarters could be better. Yes, we might not get the immediate next quarter, which is where we're in now, quarter two, being the best of the best. But literally, if this easing issue, external forces actually start easing, then we'll actually see some benefit. But take it irrespective. Nigeria's macro policy has played the right part. CBN has done it. Now, invariably, just as you said, now we've got the Nigerian fiscal measuring of 2026 finally done to rebalance. You know, two aspects of economics: macro, micro. Macro being your monetary policy, which literally you should applaud the CBN for whatever they've done in the last 2 years.
And now we're seeing something coming from the fiscal side, but we're going to get into that.
Correct.
You know, definitely. But I still want to pick your brain on Q1 because there's a saying about the first quarter. It said it has a way of, you know, guiding the other quarters, you know, of the year, and seeing how turbulent it's been, you know, so far. What would you say were the goods, you know, for your industry, you know, in Q1? What improvements did you see, you know, this year, and what do you see, you know, going into Q2?
I think for most industries, especially my industry, we've seen the upside. I've seen increase in business. We've seen positivity in the bottom line. And where we see it, because, look, if you look at what has happened over the last 2 years or last 3 years, is there's been a deliberate attempt to reposition Nigeria for the growth we're in. If not for this blip, I think everybody was going to be smiling in 2026 because all we saw was, especially in January, we saw a rise and we saw consumer spending actually improving. And I always say, look, cable industry is the statistics of growth in Nigeria because 15% of every infrastructural spend is cable. So when we see increases, we'll see it first. And we saw increases. We saw spending increases. And when you see it, because by the time you look at the clientele coming in, I saw more increase in oil and gas spend. We saw more increase in infrastructural spend. We saw more increase in factory spending. And the type of volumes these factories or investors were investing in. Because when someone starts asking a certain volume of cable, you can predict the total size of the project itself. And those are the type of volumes I've seen this year that has increased from where we are. And if I look at it, I'm saying for me, I see a year where it's a minimum of a double the turnover type of year for us. And if I can see double the turnover, and I didn't see it in the last 2 years, it seems capacity utilization is going to be increased. Utilization in every factory will be increased. And therefore, that turns into something else, which is positivity. Now, blip or no blip, it's 250 million Nigerians. Something is going right. It has to happen. And that would actually change things for the better. Because it's that spending you need to happen. If the spending is not there, then all of us will be contracting. Now, we're contracting in March because of a blip. Of course, cost went up. You have to readjust. How do you deal with it? Now, for us, the prices are stabilized. We saw a copper price increase to almost $14,000 per ton. That was a shock to the system for anybody because we've never even seen 12 until December in the history of commodity pricing. Now we saw it $14,000 copper, but now it's eased. Technical corrections will happen over time. Now we've got about 12,700 to a 13,000 mark. where the surpluses and the balances and the market is readjusting to technical issues. Now, when you look at that, if it's happened in our own industry, it's happening generally in most industries. And what you also should see, and this is the positives also for us, is that interest rate is tailing down. Even as we see issues around the world, we're not at the heights where people are borrowing 35% anymore. We're all now at the mid-25s, and it's coming down, and it's still coming down. So recapitalization of the banking industry, I saw them more buoyant. They're borrowing a bit more now. They're lending at better pricing because the cost of fund has changed for them, because now it's equity rather than lending or borrowing. So a lot of things have changed in itself that has crystallized now for the banking industry, that we have all been seeing the benefit, because some of those banks made their cutoff by July last year. And so over time, you start seeing benefits to the industry. And at the end of the day, it's going to end up being passed on to the consumer, because if my cost of sale comes down, of course I want to sell more. I'll bring my pricing down to increase my turnover,
right? Because
bottom line is still better.
And it'd be great to see, more prices, come down and less profiteering from some, producers at this point. All right, let's get into the fiscal side of things. You did mention you've seen some positives there on the fiscal side, and we did see that there's a 2026 fiscal policy there. I see some negatives, but fine. If we look at the data snapshot there, we see policy type is fiscal, trade, and tax reform. If we move to the first one, that's a data snapshot. Effective start is April. Full implementation between 2026 to 2028. So it's going to be phased. Core objectives for this fiscal policy for 2026: revenue growth, import substitution, and industrial growth. Then we now see some excise duties being increased for the likes of alcohol, increased excise duties, tobacco, increased excise duties, sugary drinks, as expected, the sugar tax, and all of that. Then for the industrial support side, we're seeing raw materials, import of raw materials, reduced tariffs there. Machinery, reduced tariffs. Chemicals, reduced tariffs. So I'm sure you like that.
Oh.
I've seen that.
Look, the good thing is, like we've spoken here about certain things I could not just phantom. There is no place in the world that wants to encourage direct investment, whether foreign or domestic, that literally is penalizing you for investing, which is what we're doing. You're penalizing people for importing machinery to create jobs. Who does that? Now, and I've argued this thing for years. Yes, we introduced import duty waivers. It became, I think, 10 to 15 years ago, you almost had to know someone to get it. Now, yes, under this current system, they've improved it a lot. It's technology-based. You apply online, you get your results. And the time frame. But why should we go through that whole process? Right? Now you put it on the national list. Chapter 84, Chapter 85, Chapter 90. All zero. That is a game changer. And, for me, I was so excited. If that one alone has been done right years ago, I don't think we'll be here where we are. So, for me, I'll commend two people. The Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, the two ministers, both for state, John Owen, and the substantive minister, Jumoke Odwale. Those two have done something the rest could not do for years. Literally fight the right policy. Fiscal policy is a balance of what your monetary policy is. You can have all the monetary policy in the world, but if you get it wrong on the fiscal side, you are making the other guy do hard work for doing less, but you will not see the impact that quickly. Now, you are going to tell people, you can bring in your machinery. You're not paying any duty for bringing it in. Nobody's penalizing you. The brilliant part is also gone on the national list. On the national list, that 4% under the customer is 1% under the national list.
So paint a picture for us now. Let's imagine you're trying to import machinery and you're paying X amount.
Correct.
What do you pay on that before this?
Before this, you paid 5%. Now, if you get the import duty exemption, you get a 5% reduction. You get the reduction on the 5%. You pay 5% on the actual amount for a reduction on dutiable. But they don't waive that 4%. It becomes an issue. So that part, I don't understand it. Now, that doesn't work. Now, under this one, it goes into the national list for everybody that qualifies for backward integration, which is every manufacturer that has been certified for backward integration. You can move to Chapter 99. Under that, you don't need to write any ministry. You don't need to write any ministry. You've got that certificate that allows you to import under Chapter 99 your machinery of Chapter 84, 85, 90. And that allows you duty-free zero. Under duty-free zero, the only payment you pay is the custom charge, which is 1% under Chapter 99. It's 4% if you're outside Chapter 99, which customs agreed with MAN last year, and that would help. So you have that advantage. So it changes the game. Raw material cost has come down also. Certain things have been done in certain areas, raw materials, chemicals, that will actually enable, some at zero, some at drop to 5%, also under those chapters, even on the normal trade tariffs. And what they've done is to enable businesses thrive, most like the industry. I think it's deliberate to actually say you want industry to grow, and once industry grows, you actually grow employment. So it's making it deliverable, at the same time making it possible for you to create jobs. And if you create jobs, the other revenue will come in, because whoever you're employing is paying payee. The company that is doing well is paying CIT, company income tax. So all this is, and you're paying VAT. It actually comes back into government revenue. Key part of it is also there's a twist to it. There's certain duties that have been that's pushed up. Yes, in certain areas they've actually pushed up those duties. But we get sometimes things wrong when we see duty or tariff increases. Tariff increases are there to rebalance tariff payables.
Right.
And those are done really to actually help businesses survive. If I don't place a 40% or 50% duty on certain importation, I would not create alternative local source.
And that's to protect, the local producers,
Correct.
At this point. But, there's still that fear, at this point. When you see excise duties on things like maybe alcohol, tobacco, and some other, goods that Nigerian consumers, like, there's also that issue of the local producers meeting that demand. And we still have the same issues here. Electricity, definitely cost of doing business. I've had that issue with a tie seller. He told me it was cheaper for him to import ties than to produce ties here.
Correct.
It'll be great to see more production here. But are we doing it too fast? Do we find a balance, at this point? Because if you're looking at the possible economic impacts of this now, for the positives, local manufacturing, boost. Agriculture, boost. Government revenue, increase. There's also an FX demand there, should be reduced. There should be less pressure on FX. Then the possible negative effects, consumer prices will go up, if excise duties go on some of these imports. That if it goes up, import businesses will feel the pressure, of that. Then inflation, potential rise in inflation. So how do we balance this?
Can I knock that negative for you a bit?
Okay.
Sometimes we analyze things rightly and sometimes wrongly. In manufacturing, it's a little bit different. If you notice one thing that does happen, you will get a bit of inflation, but sometimes it gets absorbed into their profitability bottom line. Economy of scale comes in. If you look at in our beverage industry, both non-alcoholic and alcoholic, it's a volume game. You can't come into that market and be a small player and do well. You need to be a volume player, and that means you need to invest massively. Taking the last investment that even was publicized by Inaba for a $35 million beverage industry that was opened by the governor. And it's not something that is small, neither is it done in its low capacity. But when you also look at where they're penalized, is the sugar tax, right? Which, let's be truthful to ourselves, anywhere in the world, diabetic issues has become a major pain in every place you're going. It's a big cost to most governments. And everybody now is trying to get us to be a bit more healthy. Let's be fair enough. But it must be slightly done. For Nigeria, it's not something you jump at and start charging people 50, 60 naira on. Where I see where the balance is, because we were against it at MAN, totally. And because we felt the beverage industry actually do employ a lot of people.
Right, and it also gets into the car imports markets too.
Yes, that eventually, but also there's a rebalance. The EV is zero duty.
Yeah, for EVs.
Yeah, so that also has a rebalance. So right. You can't have total wins. What you do is like, how many wins did I get? If I get majority, I'll take it. If I get a minority, I'll flip and be complaining. Normally, this thing came out on the 1st. The industry literally has known about it in the last 2 days. If this thing really was that bad, I think the advocacy part of MAN would have been screaming hell and loose faster than you would have heard about it. But if you look at it, we got our wins. We'll look at our wounds in some certain areas, but we'll rebalance. But it's the majority wins we're all looking at. You cannot have, in anything you do or anything, there's no way everybody will be satisfied by whatever decision you make. Even as individuals, there's some certain decisions we'll make that it's not going to please everybody we like. And that's life. Yeah,
I can imagine the car lovers at this point because cars are really expensive right now.
The EVs are saying we now should go EV. You can charge a charging station will charge your car.
I've seen a few BYDs on the roads at this point. But
look, the government is encouraging one thing, and I'm not an advocate for, but sometimes when policies are done the right way, we need to actually commend them. I'm not a politician, I'm a businessman. So I'll scream when you're actually doing things that really are not helping me. But when you look at it, EV cars have been zero duty since the last 2 years. And it was there to just encourage people to move away from fossil fuel to actually EV so that the cost. And when you really look at the cars, go to China, which is the #1 in terms of production of EV cars. These cars, literally, you can get an EV car for as low as $7,000 or $8,000. Rightly so, it seems that certain car importers are still taking advantage because the volume or the competitiveness of the market has not achieved that level yet. And that's what I see as a number. Because I've been to some of them and I'm literally querying why they're selling at some of the prices. Some are doing the thing the right way, some are still taking advantage. But in everything, competition will bring the right balance. And I think the more, what we see now is new players, other players. There's 150 EV car manufacturers in China. So I don't even think we've seen 10 of them yet in Nigeria. So I think the opportunities, and there are others in the world. So we're going to see better EV pricing. And as we get those EV pricing, we will get the cost coming down. And the reality is, if you look at the EV, most people charge their cars now for less than 8,000 naira. I have a friend, he was smiling every day. He's telling me, I charge my car for 8,000 naira.
When some of us are spending 70K to fill up...
he said it lasts him. Tanks. And all it does is that he's checked his bill, he charges it at home, and it costs him 8,000 on his billing. So when you look at that, that gives you an advantage. The dynamics of business opportunities in Nigeria and in Africa is changing. The quarter has been what we seem to be in the right direction. The interest rate is in the right direction. The positive vibes that we're seeing is still there. Yes, we're in an election year, but I see it also as a growth year because spending on infrastructure is more, opportunities for business, for people to do more is there. And the reality is, look, take the spending power that is a shock and blip based on external factor, not a Nigerian factor. It's short-lived. I believe it's going to be short-lived. We might feel another quarter of it, which is quarter 2. We'll start seeing the easing by quarter 3, quarter 4. And if we get that, which we would get, Nigeria will see what we were expecting to see. And that's the positive end of the harsh realities we had to face.
Right.
Immunize everything, immunize FX, remove subsidy, and see the spending. We're now seeing the benefit. Look, one thing I said even here some years ago, 2 years ago, was, look, the hardest decision had to be taken by whoever got there within the first 1-2 weeks. It was taken. But I said that it will take that person, whoever is in government, 3 years to actually show the benefit.
All right.
And we're now going to see the benefit.
All right. I guess we'll still keep tracking, and hopefully we all feel more, of the benefits going forward. Always great having this conversation with you. Thank you so much, sir, for helping us unpack all of these matters, and definitely we'll be analyzing this document, as time goes by. Thank you so much, Mr. George Onafowokan is the MD CEO, Coleman Wires and Cables. Thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Laddie.